And today I have the pleasure of hosting a really great webinar on a topic that I hear every single day, which is how do you actually build an omni-channel brand that is successful? You know, with many companies, they'll decide to either start off with e-commerce or grocery, sometimes trying to juggle both at the same time, maybe add in food service, and it can get really challenging to manage all of those different channels at the same time. But so our guests today have a lot of experience in doing that and a lot to add on the topics. And so I'd love to go ahead and ask everyone to introduce themselves as part of the panel. We'll start with Amy. You can go ahead and do a quick intro.
Hi, sure. My name's Amy Zitelman. I'm co-founder and CEO of Soom Foods. We've set out to make tahini a more appreciated and popular ingredient in the American market.
Excellent. And then Amy, which channels are you selling in now?
So we sell through food service, but primarily into the restaurant space with strategic distributors, D2C online on our website and on Amazon, and also brick and mortar retail.
Excellent. All right, Patrick from Tiesta Tea.
Yes, my name is Patrick. I'm the co-founder of Tiesta Tea. We are a loose leaf tea company based in Chicago, and we're on a mission to make tea products that taste good and do good. We sell in several different channels. This product right here, we sell into food service. This product right here, we sell into the dairy in the grocery stores. This product right here, we sell online and in grocery stores, and same with that product. So I'm excited to talk to you guys a little more about the different channels we sell in.
Excellent. And Tina with survey.com.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tina Adolfsson, and I'm with survey.com. We do retail merchandising very much for emerging brands and also for the leading brands. We go across all retailers, but always in brick and mortar stores. So we've helped people grow in grocery, convenience stores, mass merchants, drugstores, and many, many more specialty.
Excellent. So thanks so much for the introduction, everyone. Just in terms of quick ground rules, if you have any questions for our panelists based on anything that they said, feel free to just pop those into the chat at any time. That way we can make sure to ask your questions when they're relevant. I'll go ahead and then ping the panelists and include that as part of our conversation. Really, this is a webinar for you to learn as much as you can and to get out of it as much as you can. So be sure to ask as many questions as you come up with. All right, so Amy, I'd love to start with you and just understanding when Soom got started, which channel did you decide to launch in first and why?
So when we first started, we launched into two channels. It was brick and mortar retail and also the restaurant industry. And it was quite quickly, well, actually over a year later, where we were evaluating our successes and our challenges, where we noticed that most of our revenue was coming from the restaurant industry, but most of our challenges were coming from the retail industry. So about a year into business, we decided to focus relatively exclusively on developing our restaurant sales channel.
Excellent. And then as you were kind of building between those two, when did you decide to expand and add D2C to that?
So as we developed more intimate and credible relationships in the restaurant industry, we found that chefs were inclined to share that they were using Soom tahini in their restaurants, and that trickled to the press, which ultimately inspired at-home cooks to want to have the product. And since distribution and growth in retail was particularly challenging for us, as I think it's challenging for a lot of CPG brands, we put our product available on Amazon before even really investing heavily into our own website. So we've been on Amazon probably since 2014 or so, you know, relatively early into Soom Foods being in distribution.
And then I know you mentioned that a lot of the revenue was coming from the restaurant channel, a lot of the headaches from grocery and retail. Talk about that a little bit, like what it was like for you launching in grocery and retail. What were those headaches that you dealt with?
I mean, the foundation, the overall most important thing that we were considering at the time was the fact that restaurants buy ingredients more often and they buy more of it, right? So a restaurant would buy a 40-pound bucket a week, whereas it would take a lot of initiative to convince a consumer to buy an 11-ounce jar. And maybe it would take them 3, 6, even 12 months to go through that. So in terms of velocity of our product and also, a foundation of revenue, the restaurant industry provided a lot of benefits there. Retail, I kind of joke that it's not quote unquote that hard to get your product onto shelves. Their challenge is really getting your product off of shelves, right? Telling people when there are 10,000, products to choose from in a grocery store that yours is available and why they should choose yours. And so, the cost associated with building a CPG brand, that consumer facing brand, was outside of the realm of the, financial realities that Soom had at the time. And the restaurant industry was providing a lot of benefit in building credibility for our product and for our brand, and for national distribution. And so it was with all of those factors in mind that we made those strategic decisions.
Love that. And then when you were entering into the, selling to restaurants, how did you go about building those relationships? And was that process like, and how does it kind of differ from grocery selling?
Good old fashioned, salesmanship. I would choose a market, of course, being based in Philadelphia. We started with the Philadelphia market. We were lucky enough to connect with Chef Michael Solomonov, who has one of the best restaurants, if not the best restaurants in the whole country. And with his seal of approval and using of our product, he also helped to amplify our message and credibility about the ingredient. But ultimately, what I do is choose a market. I'd go on websites like Eater or Food and Wine and find restaurant lists, right? The best of restaurants, ultimately to see who would fit into Soom's, description of an ideal customer. And so based off of that, I would look at menus, who was already using tahini, who might be using ingredients that are complementary to tahini, but not using tahini yet. And I'd make a list of, say, 24 restaurants, fly or drive to that market and schlep along lots of jars of Soom and pack a rolly backpack and walk around the whole city, knocking on doors and asking chefs if they would meet with me. Most wouldn't. And then I would leave a sample and, of course, follow up. For anybody else on the call today that's in sales, just really old school sales philosophies there.
I love that. And actually like getting on the ground, talking to people, talking to chefs, because if you're like most chefs at busy restaurants, they're not like checking their emails regularly and getting very diligent about getting back to you. So you really have to kind of like pick up the phone, show up in person, right? And try to like interrupt their day.
And the most important thing is that they taste the product. I mean, selling an ingredient is different than selling a prepared product. And I think that that's something that differentiated Soom versus other packaged goods that are looking to get into the restaurant industry. But ultimately, they need to be able to taste your product. They have to be able to, experiment with your product and test it in their recipes. And so we built in a very high allotment of sampling, units as well.
Would you actually like offer them a sample on the spot or like bring a complimentary product to taste it with, or how did that typically work?
Yeah, if they would take the time to sit with me, I would I'll open a jar with them to compare it to the tahini that they were currently using on the spot. And if they, didn't have the time to meet with me, which most different, I would leave a full size jar with them. So really enough to be able to taste and test with was crucial, I think, for chefs considering, using our ingredient in their kitchens.
And then I love this. So along with that, how did you manage the branding aspect, right? With this being as an ingredient, did you ask chefs to talk about like Soom as the ingredient behind it? Did they put it on their menu? Did you not care as much because you were looking for volume? What was your strategy?
Well, exactly. I mean, in terms of the company's brand as a whole, it was not our first priority. We were really resting our laurels on the quality of the product and our customer service, right? Like the experience of working with Soom. And so our jars were really ugly. Our website wasn't super functional. But yes, to your point, as we were developing this restaurant pipeline, our primary priority was volume. And so whether somebody wanted to put us on the menu or not, truly came organically just based off of developing relationships and I guess my friendships that I built with chefs or managers over the years. And so, no, I would say that branding was secondary to the emphasis and the priority that we put on proving our business model in terms of the quality of our product and I guess the trust that they can put into our business.
That's great. And then, Kate kind of had a question along with that too. Like, did you ever get into a situation where you like arranged or had to negotiate like having the Soom logo on a menu, or did that just come from relationships?
That only has still to this day, 8 years later, only come from relationships. And I'm just now with a more expanded branding and marketing team working on strategies for how we might be able to, prove value or assign value to that type of branding relationship. But for most of I think all of the restaurants that decided to share that they were using Soom, it purely came from an organic and authentic place. And so we have not ascribed a lot of value or negotiation, tactics to that yet.
Perfect. This is so interesting. I have a million other questions, but we'll get into some of those later. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk with Patrick about your journey. So you're in the tea category. Talk about kind of where you first started in what channel you started with, Patrick.
It's a great question. So I started my business when I was in college. I was 21 years old. I really didn't know anything about business or tea or food or anything. So we really just tried to sell to anyone that had a door and a register. If they had a door and a register, we tried to go in. And at one point, we went on a 500 door-to-door trip in New York, Philadelphia, Seattle, Vancouver. We also went to Madison, where you're at, Jordan. And after knocking on 500 doors, everything from fitness centers to restaurants to cafes to grocery stores, there was one person who gave us a PO on the spot, and that was a grocery store. All the cafes wanted nothing to do with loose leaf tea. The grocery stores, what we identified at that point after doing 500 store visits to different channels, was grocery stores was where the problem, we had a solution to the problem grocery stores were facing, which was they didn't have loose leaf tea on the shelf. So if you were to go to a Jewel or a Star Market or a, Albertsons, 10 years ago, they didn't have loose leaf tea. They had 45 different brands of bag tea. And so it became a very obvious solution to us to bring them loose leaf tea to the grocery store shelves. So that kind of became our first channel. And then as that evolved, we've noticed that in the tea category, many of the products you see, for example, the bottled tea, I don't know what teas go into making the bottled tea that I drink. So for all the products that we create, we're using the same exact tea. So we took the loose leaf tea and then created a bottle out of it. And that helped us go into the dairy and juice category. That same loose leaf tea, we can brew it in these dispensers, and that's for food service. So it all started in grocery, identifying a problem there and just exploiting it. And then as we developed our grocery presence, we were able to go into different channels. I mean, the best part about when you do in the grocery store for us, the grocery store is multi-channel, but a lot of people don't realize it, right? Like there's a lot of food service components in grocery store that you can sell into. So one of our best customers was Winco Foods, and they do a lot of loose leaf tea with us. So when they were expanding they were doing a couple grand openings, and we met with them, and they wanted a food service program for their cafe. And so we created it for them. So I think it's a lot easier, or at least from our experience, it's been easier going into different channels with some of the same customers.
Patrick, man, I love so much about your story and your journey over time and what you and Dan, his co-founders, have created, because, right, like you did this 500 store trip across the country to like sell in, which I think is what a lot of founders need to do, honestly, to get started versus sitting in front of a computer and sending out emails as your start. But then, right, you started off in tea, great product, but like, talk about like the velocity in the tea aisle at the grocery store. Like it's one of the lowest velocity aisles, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we had to pivot into other channels. It's a great point, Jordan. In tea right now, the units per store per week, it's around 0.5 to 1 units per store per week, depending on the retailer. And that's not a lot of volume. I mean, when you consider a $5 product, it's really tough to get to 10 million on something like that. So it was a great, a lot of the revenue, from the sell in was great, but the sell through is just, it's slow, and it's not the product, it's just the category. So that's kind of what helped us pivot to what I'll call faster moving categories like dairy and juice and food service. But yeah, I mean, and I'm sure there's some people right now that are in those slower moving categories where the first order is that big one, and then the repeat business is just okay,
Yeah. And right, that had nothing to do with like Tiesta or the brand. It was just like literally the consumer was just not shopping that often in the category, almost no matter what you were selling them. And I even love how though you pivoted to your bulk loose leaf tea offerings in stores, right? Where you're kind of pre-bagging or pre-bottling things, but talk about how the velocity kind of changed when you went to like that bulk loose leaf set.
Yeah, it's a great topic. So we pivoted to, we didn't pivot, but we offered another concept, which was a bulk fixture. You scoop your own tea into bins, and the movement on that was about 10x compared to the movement on shelf. So we were getting 250 to 500 per week per retailer on the bulk set, which was just astronomical compared to the loose leaf tea. However, it was a much more complicated program. Much bigger upfront investment because we had to buy the fixture, but that was a program when you can increase your volumes by around 10x on a sell-in through a different channel. It's the same product. We would just sell it in 1 pound bags, and the store would refill it in like these bulk dispensers. That was a huge win for us. Unfortunately, COVID shut down all bulk foods, so that was we lost almost $1 million of business because of all this, what people used to scoop, that all got shut down. The only thing people are keeping are what I'll call the gravity bins, where you pull a lever and the product comes down from the bottom. So after that, we had to pivot again, and because bulk was a big business for us. So we used a lot of the same customers. Winco Foods was one of our bulk customers, and we created this food service program for them. And this is really an amazing program because it's, you talk about multi-channel and omni-channel. This product right here is in Winco's pizza department. They have a pizza deli where they're selling pizza and you can get cold brew tea. This product right here is in their bulk and grocery department. They brew this every day. Every single day they brew it, 4 flavors, sampling our product for $2.99 a cup. If the customer likes it, then they can come here and buy it and take it home. The cost of this also for the grocery store, it's what I'll call a shrink buster, because you can brew it on premise. And you can sell it for $3 a cup. They make a lot of money, and the space needed is very minimal. So we're still doing bulk with some retailers, but this has been a really big focus for us because we're helping these retailers with their food service offering.
Very cool. And right, like I think that focus on what you guys care about, which is the tea, is really huge, and it's allowed you to innovate in these spaces with seemingly like simple changes, but no one else is doing it, and it's made a huge difference in business, right? You're not coming out with the Tiesta frozen yogurt line, right? Or like something completely new. You're sticking with tea, but are able to drive incremental value and benefit to the retailers and these other sets. Talk about what you're doing on Ecom.
Oh man, so Ecom, the dry tea side, e-commerce grew about 35%, the tea category on e-commerce last year. We grew around 200-300%. Tea is a very great e-commerce product. It's light, it's easy to ship, and it has a very long shelf life. And so we are set up right now. We operate our own distribution center. That was one thing that we did. A lot of people thought we were crazy for doing it, but we built out our own distribution center in 2017. just north of Chicago, where we control everything. We import everything, we pack everything. It's all my employees. We've got 20 people in there at any time. And so the reason why that was important, because when COVID hit, we were able to control our e-commerce procedure, if you will. I was there bagging orders. My partner was there bagging orders. I was there on Saturdays and Sundays bagging orders. It got busy, so we had to implement a night shift. So we had people coming in from 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock getting orders out. And because we owned our own distribution center, it really allowed us to really take opportunity of the growth that was provided. A lot of people probably couldn't have handled that volume, because if you're working with a 3PL, I'm not sure that they'd put your product as a priority over someone else when people are going out with COVID. We had a couple guys that went down, and so I called my marketing people. I said, hey, I'm gonna need you to stop marketing today and get in the warehouse. My sales guy was in there bagging orders. My controller was in there bagging orders, and so that's really allowed us to expand on the e-commerce front, because we're not just doing Amazon and Tiesta.com, we're drop shipping for other retailers. So if you go to Costco.com and you search Tiesta Tea, you'll see us. There's only like 3 T's on Costco.com. We just got set up with Macy's.com, where all their orders are coming into our facility. We capture all that data and we send out the orders from our facility. So it's been very, very advantageous. I would say the biggest advantage is really having our own distribution center to control the experience from start to finish. New samples, new products, handwritten notes, all that. We can do it because we have our own facility.
No, I think that's great. And I remember when you were building that out and the excitement around it, but also knowing that it's an investment. I kind of got that with T-Square, so we built out our facility for making it. So definitely understood that. Patrick Reynolds kind of had an add-on question. So how did you go about finding the food service decision makers within the retail HQ? Did you go in with your grocery and lead with that and then expand to food service? How did you kind of find that buyer decision maker?
I'll tell you, LinkedIn is my tool. I've got the LinkedIn Premium, and I'll tell you the other thing is pick up the phone and talk to the secretary. A lot of the time, and of course now COVID, you don't know who's in and who's out, but LinkedIn is a great way to find it, and then just picking up the phone and calling. And then if you've got brokers or sales reps, ask them to do some digging. At the end of the day, we just got this program into Lucky Save Mart out on the West Coast, and I just cold emailed the buyer, and he told me that I've been looking for a beverage to pair with my sandwiches. And so, it's just kind of right time, right place. Never done business with the guy before. Found him on LinkedIn, and that's it. And there's different applications that this can go in. And so showing that to the different people in the organization, they'll forward that on to the right person, and hopefully you'll get across the decision maker.
No, I think that's awesome. Especially depending on the retailer, not everyone has 100 people making decisions, right? There's like a couple buyers in each department, and usually they know each other. And so, right, you build that relationship. Sometimes they'll introduce you to others or reach out to them on LinkedIn. I like those tips. And then another question from Greg, maybe for you, Patrick. I know with your teas, you have a couple different layers of consumer info on there, right? There's your flavors. You also talk about functional kind of benefits with some of them. What have you found consumers care about most when grabbing your teas? Is it the flavor? Is it the functionality? What correlation?
It's a great question, and I think it's one of the reasons I love our brand is because we can play into the different market trends. So when COVID was going on, immunity was hot. We got this item brought into Kroger on a blueberry flavor because it had elderberries in it, and elderberries became a very trendy ingredient. So it was during COVID, it was for sure anything immunity, anything with the trendy ingredients like elderberries or things like that. But it really depends on the place, the time of the market, but definitely for us, it's function and flavor. What is it going to do for me, and what is it going to taste like? And those are the key things that we try to pull out of all of our branding.
No, I think that's key. And then Amy, a question that came up in, Kate was asking, in grocery, you often need to work with distributors who take a significant cut. Did you tend to fulfill or distribute directly to those restaurants that you're working with, or that you have to go through distributors, and are their margins different?
So Patrick can probably speak to retail better than I can, but I found that it was a chicken and egg situation, especially in the restaurant industry, right? The restaurants wanted to know what distributor carried you, and the distributors wanted to know what restaurants wanted to buy your product before you could like marry them and let that take care of a lot of the logistics. So I believe in both channels, you really need to lay the foundation yourself, develop the relationships with the buyers, deliver the product yourself. And when you reach a certain velocity and volume threshold, that's when it doesn't make sense for you to keep doing it in-house. And it's actually, even though you're cutting in a distributor and maybe giving up some of that margin, in my opinion, the efficiencies of them being able to deliver for you and also to expand you to the rest of their network is where you start taking the distributor into play. So when you're pricing your product, you want to price it as if you're going to sell and deliver it direct, and then be prepared to start cutting in each of the stakeholders along the supply chain.
Yeah, and one thing that I'll add to, so with T-Squares, we were selling to the corporate office side of food service, and it was very much that you have to sell both at the same time, right? Like you have to almost tell like the office that you do have some distribution. You ask them like, who are you buying from? And you say, oh, we'll build a relationship with them. And you go back to the distributor and you say, hey, we have this client that we're going to sell to as well, and they want to buy from you. You kind of have to like lead both those conversations at the same time. But yeah, exactly right. Like for scale in these situations, you will most likely start working with the distributors. So always make sure to build that pricing in so that you are aware that, capture that margin yourself at the beginning, but know you'll probably have to give it up for working with distributors. Tina, I want to bring you into the conversation because a lot of brands, especially now, are starting off with e-commerce as their main sales channel. And now they're starting to look at how do they transition into grocery. And what does that entail? What are the best processes to do so? And it's not as easy as Amy was saying. Getting on the shelf is not easy, but it's not the hardest part. The hardest part is getting off the shelf. So I'd love your perspective, Tina, on that process.
Absolutely, thank you. So what Patrick was mentioning about really understanding your retailer and how that retailer is structured, what kind of shopper that retailer is bringing in is very important. And then making sure that your product fits for that. So picking those first few retailers is critical. And there you're going to be talking about your product, how it's differentiated, what kind of people like your product. And if you have that information from direct to consumer, you're at a really great stage. Traditionally, you would say to a founder, start in the little farmer's market and get that feedback from people. You're getting that feedback electronically, especially with last year being a COVID year. A lot of people missed out on those trade shows to get into retailers, but use that data, and data is going to be something that is going to be valuable for you just going forward. Once you get past those first three retailers, where it's really about you, your manufacturing process, and what is appealing about your product, it is going to be about data. It's going to be retailers 4, 5, and 6 are going to be asking about your velocity, how you support the retailer as you're doing things, because you're right. In addition to building in the economies that you need for the distributor, you also need to understand that each retailer wants to be supported in the way that they think their shoppers respond. Some of them, it's about end cap programs. Some of them, it's about, buy 2, get 1 free. Some of them is about like big displays of a seasonal nature or Super Bowl or something like that. So play along with what your retailer thinks is the right way to speak to their shoppers. They do know that best.
I think that's really valuable. Tina, it's interesting. I think we've talked about this before, but whenever I talk to new brands and they're pitching to grocery stores, they're always asked about their promotional strategy. And it seems like there's 2 or 3 answers that always come up, but aren't always fully supported. I think especially pre-COVID, there's like, all right, I'll do product demos as one and sampling. And then second is usually some form of like, oh yeah, I'll do like geo-targeting with like Facebook ads. I've heard so many brands mention that, but I feel like only 5% of the brands actually try doing it. And most of the time, like it doesn't really work because they don't see a return on those sales. So what have you found, or have you seen anything that like any of your clients are doing that's like working in grocery to increase those sales?
Well, sampling works. You know, taste and texture, being able to sip that beverage or being able to like crunch on a granola bar, that's important. Or a little teaspoonful of ice cream, that's all important. Right now, that kind of sampling isn't happening, but you're still getting the coupons, which just limits that barrier to trial. So you're still trying to get through just trial and sampling. If you can be in a discovery box, if you can be partnered with some, if you can hand out coupons, that's going to let people say, oh, this is interesting. And if you can add your story to that coupon, whether it is your local, right? So some retailers really play up the local factor. Whole Foods does, Wegmans does, Trader Joe does. So then talk about how you are from that area, that region, and bring that up. If the flavor, for example, Shaka tea happens to be a Hawaiian hibiscus and they're supporting their Hawaiian farmers, tell that story because it's incredibly important in Hawaii and it is interesting to people across the mainland. So really bring that into your sampling, even though right now you might be just doing the dry sampling. Going back to the micro-targeting, if you have that direct-to-consumer business, you have the data. And then you can start micro-targeting with influencers that are really specific to a region. You can micro-target, for example, Macy's really likes to do that. So if you're a food product that's a gift product, which is the other thing I was going to say about tea. Tea is fantastic because it's a great gift, right? You can so easily send it across the country to someone that you love and say, you know, this is part of your wellness. I'm thinking of you. I'm taking care of you. So it's just such a great giftable project. So if you can bring that in and tell that into the story, how, you know, your loved ones around the US that you might not be able to see right now can still experience something and think about you as they're eating and drinking. I mean, at the end of the day, food, beverage is the way that people, you know, get together. But even if you're just doing it remote, it's still something that shows love in a deeper way. So if you can just bring that storytelling into what you're doing. Micro-targeting is really good.
Absolutely love that. You know, one thing that I always find helpful too is we have a growing e-commerce business. You know, use your location of your customers to understand like who they are and where they're buying from. I would also recommend surveying them to understand why they're buying your product versus others, because if they're coming to your website to buy, then they must really like you. I mean, as we can all probably experience, most consumers do not like going to a brand's website to buy. It's inconvenient, right? If that's a one-off product that they have to purchase, which means that they really like you and it's worth it for them. And so really understand why they're doing so, because you can leverage that information towards others. And then the other thing that I found helpful is asking them where they shop, so you can understand the types of stores that they buy from. And there was a great company called WeStock that I'm friends with the founder there, and they basically have a survey and a tool that allows you to understand where your customers are shopping and then leverage that data to pitch to retail buyers to say, hey, we have X number of customers who are actually shopping at your stores right now and they want to buy your product here. So it kind of replaces those like those cards that sometimes brands used to give out to like go to your store and hand to your brand or your store manager. They actually print those out as well for their customers. But even just using that information can help you understand who your shoppers are, where they shop, and how you can build out your retail strategy that way. So I've seen a lot of brands enter into a new store that their shoppers actually don't shop at, and their product does not do well there.
Agreed.
Okay, so a couple other questions that have come up here. Cecilia was asking, I know Amy, you kind of mentioned this as well, but what is your main customer acquisition strategy for e-commerce, Facebook, Google, influencers, and essentially like how's that performing in terms of like acquisition costs? I don't know if like Amy, you have anything to add to that, or if you manage e-commerce, Patrick as well.
I don't manage Ecom at Soom, but I have to say that that's something that Soom is improving upon. And our main acquisition is actually organic searches for Soom foods. So I'll have to excuse myself from that question.
So I could chime in a little bit. We started similarly with kind of just organic acquisition, just doing brand awareness on Facebook and Instagram. That was around March of last year. Our cost of acquisition was around $6. Average order rate was around 40. It was very profitable. And so what we did was we kind of doubled down on that, hired a freelancer from Upwork to help us with our Facebook and Instagram advertising. And our customer acquisition cost right now is around $13. It doubled. Our spend also doubled, but that's been super helpful. And what I would say is check out an app called lifetimely.io. This app has been so helpful for us in determining where to spend, how much to spend, what our lifetime value is, what the customer acquisition cost is. And that can really help you direct where you spend your marketing efforts. And so, you know, for every brand, it's going to be a little different based on your clientele. We skew towards females and a lot towards moms. Moms love Facebook. And so that's a good place for us. If you're younger, you know, maybe you need to do it on TikTok. But either way, Lifetimely can plug into if you're using Shopify, Lifetimely can plug into your Shopify and your ad platforms and give you exact numbers on what you're paying for a customer.
I think that's huge.
If I can chime in, a lot of the incubators, the accelerators, and the organizations like a Naturally Bold or Naturally Austin are doing these really great collaborations across brands. That is an easy way to start early on, and then you discover what kind of products your shoppers are buying in addition to yours. So if you can connect with things that go together. So for example, you know, Patrick, you could go with anyone who has like a biscotti or a little cookie or anything like a biscuit. I think those kinds of things are making sense. And also when there's things that are, you know, themed. In March, there were product boxes that were all female founder boxes. Not female product necessarily, but just they were female founders that had some excellent products. And that's a great way to just get some new trials, some new information, and you benefit together. You lower that cost of acquisition and win together.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Tina.
What you said right there, Tina, is super important. And that's just kind of what we would do is you'd build lookalike audiences. So who is the audience that you currently are trying to target? What do they look like? Well, for us, it's anyone who likes Tivana, anyone who likes David's tea. And so we'd build audiences based on people that like them and then serve ads towards them. And that I mean, when you can pin down your customer like that, it makes the advertising much easier.
Patrick, do you manage your e-commerce in-house with your team or work with an agency?
We do it all in-house. My COO is our EVP. Then I have a marketing manager, and then we have certain consultants for certain pieces. And then one of the other key pieces is we also have a designer in-house. So he can put together any design assets that we need for emails, social. He's a full-timer on our staff.
I love that. I mean, I think that's also interesting, right? So a lot of the founders listening in, they might have like 1 or 2 or 3 team members right now. At which point did you start thinking about adding part-time or full-time resources to help manage with different parts of the business, either like different channels or different kind of roles in the company?
I mean, it's a good question, kind of tough one, because all of it's kind of tied down to cash flow. You know, it's like you can't really hire people if you don't have the means to do it. So it was a really slow build. So we first started with just our key employees doing certain things. And then, you know, we started, our first hire was a freelancer to do Facebook and Instagram ads. And we hired him back in April of last year, and we still work with him today. And then started seeing success with that. So then later this year, we hired in 2020, we hired a video firm to help us with videos. saw some success with that. And then in 2021, what we've done is we've hired a SEO consultant to help with our search engine optimization. And then we hired an email consultant to help with our Klaviyo email flows. But it all kind of was, as the business grew and the tactics we put in place were successful, then we'd reach out and find what I'll call another bell or whistle to add to the entire thing. But I will say we hired an agency in about February of last year, and they sucked, and we fired them. And we made it quick. And then in April we hired the freelancer. So if we would have stayed with that agency, I don't know if we would have continued hiring the SEO, the video, all that until we made sure that the Facebook freelancer was working.
No, I love that strategy. And then how do you think about, and this is for both you and Amy, but how do you think about managing your customers across different channels in terms of someone's buying on Ecom, understanding if they're buying in grocery or vice versa, or do you kind of keep each of those separate?
Good question. I think it's important to be able to describe and ascribe a definition to a customer in each channel. But for me, the reality is they so heavily influence each other and heavily influence the business in a lot of cross-sectional, ways that it's very, very challenging. But we have a lot of internal conversations about who our customers are, what we think inspired them to buy, whether in the grocery store or, online. And I think if we were to be able to create a formula that Soom would grow even faster than we've been growing so far.
Yeah, I'd call that the $1 million question, my man. Billion. I mean, it's truly like, when you look at your customer, it's brutal because when you look at what I'll call a repurchase rate, if you're looking at it online, well, how do you know they didn't buy it in the grocery store, right? And who knows, they could have skipped out on their purchase that month or that year, and maybe they just got it at the grocery store. Maybe someone gave it to them as a gift, so that repurchase rate, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. But that's one of the things we're doing, and I would advise this to any business, at least do this every 3 years, is interview your customers. So we picked 3 different fields. We picked customers that have ordered in the last 3 months. We picked customers that haven't ordered in 18 months, and customers that have been ordering for 5+ years. And we interviewed those 3 buckets, and I haven't done the interview. Someone on my team's doing it. But I'm very excited to hear the findings because I have no idea why they're ordering or why they stopped ordering. I hope the person who said I stopped ordering says, oh, it's because I started buying it in bulk at Winco. I hope, right? Or maybe say, you know what, I hated your tea and I found someone else, but I don't know. And until I get that information, you're kind of lost with it. And we'll give them like, $15 on the website as a thank you for their 15 minutes of time. But you got to talk to your customers. And one of the things, like I said in the beginning, like doing that 500 door trip, I wouldn't have gone all in on grocery if I didn't realize after 500 doors that the grocery stores were the ones who needed our product. And that's when we went all in on grocery.
And Tina really spoke to this, but also the opportunity of starting smaller at these farmers markets, right? That's a lot of what Soom did to complement our restaurant sales, was sampling in farmers markets or in the small co-ops that were kind of our first 2, right? Like our first retailers, and standing in the stores and sampling and getting that feedback. If somebody tastes the tahini and says, oh, that's gross, well, I'm going to, start to create responses to that type of a decision. Or, oh, I only use tahini to make hummus. Well, here's how we can, continue the conversation about how you can use tahini in a lot of other ways. And that ability to talk to your customers either on a small scale, one-on-one, or as you grow on a larger scale to check in, is so valuable in creating strategies to continue to grow.
Yeah,
I'll tell you.
Okay, Patrick.
I was just going to tell you, Amy, I have been dying for a good tahini brand. I'm not going to lie. My family grew up my family's from the Middle East. Tahini was a staple in my house growing up. You open the fridge and there was always a fresh jar from my mother.
And why don't you have any now?
I have been trying to find different brands. I just bought a brand called, and I'm gonna try yours too. I just brought Tata Foods Tahini, and it was it's a new. I don't know what it is, but I tried it. It was all right. But I'm excited to try your brand. You seem pretty passionate about tahini.
Happy to send you some.
No, I'm gonna buy it. But awesome. Can't wait to try it.
And I'm buying it as well. To build on what you were saying, sometimes it's not even that the person doesn't like it, but one of the best examples, one of those very polarizing things is peanut butter, smooth or crunchy. And if you're the founder and you love smooth peanut butter and you're not offering the crunchy one, you're going to be missing out on people that feel just as strongly that that is the best way. Again, food and love go together. People think about the right way to eat an Oreo cookie. Like, you know, some people are like, you animal, how did you, like, you just bit into it? You're supposed to do this and like whatever. Food is love. So, you know, play that up in your social media, but really understand that that is one of the reasons why your shopper is going to come to you or walk away from you. So figure out kind of like, what's that one thing that you should definitely have to appeal to the 30% that aren't like you. Remember that you're not the only consumer out there.
No, I think that's great, Tina. You know, good and bad, I think every brand needs to reflect on their like values and what they stand for, but then also make sure that you're not excluding people just for a silly reason, like in the peanut butter example. Or I know other companies who are like, I just don't like that flavor of something, but like consumers will like ask for that all the time. And so you're really doing yourself a disservice doing that. Another question that came in, and again, keep asking questions in the chat. We have about 12 more minutes remaining, so happy to get to all of those. Greg asks, following up on the multi-channel customer question, how do you manage multi-channel pricing? And I think he's probably leading towards e-commerce as well and pricing on Amazon, your own Shopify site, and grocery.
Well, as a foundational rule, right, like the larger the size you're going, the customer is likely expecting a cheaper cost per ounce or whatever is that unit of measurement that you're dealing with. So I would keep that in mind when building out, you know, these different tiers of pricing. Other things to keep in mind is ultimately just how much, you know, take as much margin as you can get, because something and somebody's going to come in and take it right from you. So when you're selling directly to the consumer, you want to price your product as competitively as possible, but also with enough margin in there that in the event that they end up buying it at the grocery store needs to take a margin. And like we were talking about buying from a distributor, that distributor needs to take a margin. So I would keep that in mind, and also remember who that end purchaser is. A restaurant has much smaller margins than a grocery store, and so they need better pricing than, right, these consumer channels. So you know, I think just doing some perspective on which channel and who their end user is will help you with tiering out that pricing.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I think a problem that we all experience is building out our pricing for a channel or store, and then realizing that every channel and every store and distributor has different pricing and how that affects our margins. Because like, I remember with, you know, Whole Foods, when we were selling T-squares there, first we were going direct, so we kind of figure out our margin there and kind of had to estimate what our distributor kind of cost would be. And we knew the Whole Foods margin for our product, which was about 30%. And when we moved to Jewel, we had to start working with KeHE, and then also had to work on a different margin structure for Jewel. And so that changed our calculations. But it was tough to really then change our MSRP in price. And so, you know, we're kind of asked as brands to think multi-directionally about like what our pricing looks like across different channels. And I guess that brings up another question is, have either of you had to change your pricing, say with the increase in ingredient costs or inflation or anything else? Or have you kept their prices the same.
Okay. We've changed ours, Patrick. I don't know. You?
We have not. Well, it depends on the line. So, like shit, I'm not allowed. I don't know what I'm allowed to say, but we're launching a private label with a large retailer in White Claw cans. So the same liquid, but in a White Claw can. And man, these White Claw cans, how many of y'all are drinking White Claws out there? Because we can't keep them in stock. When we first started the project in, I think it was like September of 2020, the cans were about 30 cents a pop. We just placed our first order and the cans were 45 cents a unit. So you're talking almost 33% increase on the can. So believe it or not, a White Claw can, 45 cents for a can. I can't believe it. But we had to, if we didn't pass that to our customer, we would have been screwed. So we reached out to the customer and we just said, hey, here's the deal. Here's our margin. We'll be totally honest with you. And we told them that once the price goes down to where we expect it to go in the future, we'll pass those savings back to them. And they agreed. And it wasn't just it was a 15% price increase to a large national customer. And they agreed to do it. And I think honesty is the key there. In terms of the retail customers, I don't really know much about that. What I can tell you is we've sold to Costco, and you've got people who go to Costco and just buy the product and resell it for $5 more on Amazon. And then you got people who buy it on your website who reach out saying, why did I get it cheaper here? Blah. And it's like, listen, I can't control how everyone's going to price it. I can tell you that I sell it fairly to everybody. And at the end of the day, if someone complains that they got it somewhere else for a better price, and say, listen, buy it from them for that price. There's a reason why they got that price.
Speaking of that, have you had to deal with Amazon like hijackers and people who post other like resell your product on there? And have you dealt with that?
Yeah, we have. We try to just contact them, tell them to shut it down, but it's just, how much time are you going to spend policing and how much time are you going to spend selling,
So that happened to us once, and we contacted them to try to shut it down. We ended up kind of navigating our way, detective, through our supply chain to figure out how they were even getting it. But in the interest of our future success on Amazon, we enrolled in the transparency program for our best-selling SKU on Amazon, which is, of course, an additional cost. But you can put a unique QR code on every single one of your packages that verifies not only to Amazon, but also to the customer that they're getting it directly from the brand itself. And that has protected us. We have not had any other resellers of our product on Amazon since.
No, that's very good to know. And then question from Osama about selling to corporate food service, schools, cafeterias, hotel cruise ships. Do either of you do that?
Not much yet, but my experience in pitching into those types of food service management companies is a popular SKU for them, and definitely since COVID, are grab and go, so single use. I don't know, Osama, what your product is, but if it's available as a snack, those I know that a lot of food service management companies have been expanding that category.
Yeah, one thing I'll share from the T-Square side, and getting into that market, a lot of it is kind of like we were talking about in terms of like building a relationship with someone who's there at the office or a cruise ship or reaching out to them. The best way is if you know someone through your network, maybe through school or something that works at that company, asking them to introduce you to the office manager or the food service kind of company who runs that if they work there. A lot on the corporate side, they will order based on the recommendations for their employees, even if only one person is asking for something. That said, with everyone working from home, that industry dropped to zero for the last year. It's starting to come back now. I just got a message from McKinsey & Co., the consulting company, and they have 1,000-person office in Chicago, and they're letting in 10 to 20 people a week into the office. They want to buy food, right? It's like, all right, 10 to 20 compared to 1,000 is a lot smaller. But if you get in now, then hopefully those velocities start to increase as more and more people go into the office, and it's something that was familiar with them. And then the other piece I've seen work really well is getting your brand just out there in press and PR, and like why you're different as a founder in this product. And a lot of people are looking for a more diverse range of products to bring in right now, and will actually reach out to you for those as well.
There's another avenue I'd love to recommend. Definitely go back to your partners, like any of your vendors that are actually closer to a partner than just a vendor. Ask them what they can do to help you. For example, Kroger has a wellness experience, and it's sort of like a little mini trade show where everyone can highlight their products to the families in the greater Cincinnati area and also in Chicago. Last year it didn't happen, so this year it's been a lot more virtual. We are sponsors of it. So one of the things that we could do is a 30-second spot. We ended up donating that to to Siete, because they have they're a Latino founder, the family story, and they had a great 30-second spot about family and dinner that worked really well. Whereas, 30-second spot about how wonderful we can be to help you on retail shelves wouldn't really resonate with the mothers. Or, for example, I can write 12 recipes and 8 blog posts, and I'm going to be writing about how shoppers are now looking at the ingredients, at the materials that they're putting on their skin in skincare, at the packaging implications of what they're doing. And we're offering that to all of our clients and to, all the food bevy members, and of course, Tiesta and to Amy. So that is something that you can be. You can be part of a recipe, like your tahini recipe, your mother's old recipe, tell a story around it and have that be in there. What I would recommend is that if you could find something that is 4 completely different categories, be part of that and be less of those, top 10 tahini brands or top 10 hard seltzer brands. Just be part of, cocktails, canned cocktails and some hard seltzers and some wines that don't have sulfites. Be part of something like that so that you are unique and stand out, but you're part of a bigger theme of healthier drinking, healthier wellness, something along those lines. And again, your partners are going to know about those things because they're going to be brought in to those retailer programs sooner. And they will know that this August, in the heat wave of the Cincinnati Midwest, a lot of people are going to be looking at a lot of great products to try because Kroger would like you to try the wellness products.
Excellent. I definitely love that. So if anyone is interested, feel free to reach out to me or directly to Tina at survey.com, and she can help you with that. This hour always goes by so fast. I always have so much fun and so much many other questions to ask, but I really appreciate Tina, Patrick, and Amy, you sharing your insights and your stories and experiences as part of this panel. Very insightful. I hope everyone got their questions answered, but looking forward to what all of you accomplish this year and where your brands go. So thanks so much for being on today. Thanks so much everyone for joining. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I do have a recording of this, so I'll be sending that out over the weekend or on Monday so that you can watch any part that you've missed. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your Friday, enjoy the weekend, and best of luck coming up. Bye now.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan. Thanks, everyone.